mentioned by Venkat when he focused on some of the key aspects of GTM, and we'll bank upon that concept which he has played before me coming here, and then we'll delve into something more interesting, which is regarding sales enablement. I think this is one area which everybody knows that they have to spend time, but unfortunately we end up spending less time because of multiple priorities, and at times I have also been responsible for making that mistake. So today I would be walking you through some of the avenues around sales enablement, which ideally you should be focusing upon if you are trying to build a repeatable, scalable SaaS model. Before I go there, a quick introduction about myself. My name is Manish Porwal. I'm working with Sirion as Director of Sales. Sirion is a Series T funded contract lifecycle management solution. We are present in more than 70 countries at this stage, and roughly working with more than 300 plus enterprise customers, typically ranging between 300K to 500K as an average ARR. My previous work experience has been with Loginext. I worked there for 8 years. I was the first employee after the two founders, and I was able to make sure that we were able to scale our product. And actually, I was at a stage when we were writing the first line of code. So yeah, so sales does happen in parallel while you're writing your first line of code, because you're able to validate some of your concepts and you're able to iterate on what you're building, right? So that happened. So I think back in 2014 at Loginext, we were primarily selling in India, 100% of our revenues, till when I exited in December 2022, wherein less than 10% was coming in from India. And we had a good contribution coming in from US and Europe, which was one market for us, and then Asia Pacific and Middle East, which was almost an equal contributor, right? That's another area which doesn't get talked about much, that APAC and Middle East Africa can also be a good contributor in your revenue if your product is solving the problems. So while we were growing our business, obviously we were facing scenarios wherein we had to expand into different markets. You can, if you are having your employee base in India, which most of the SaaS companies which are originating from India have, they are always facing the conundrum: should they hire local or should they sell from India? Like, the beauty of SaaS is that you can go global from your base location itself, right? Wherein your product can act as a plugin, or it can be integrated with other enterprise suite, and it's a sequential flow of information which can help customers sign on to your platform within 3 to 6 months of a sales cycle. That's typically a model which any enterprise SaaS company would follow. However, obviously sometimes it requires high touch. Customers want to meet you, and we're talking about if you're selling to Fortune 500 or Fortune 2000. In that manner, you end up hiring locally as well, and that's wherein sales enablement as a function comes into picture. A lot of the people who are sitting in your head offices versus people who are selling remotely, there is a huge disconnect, and that is not apparent, or that is not known to the people who are kind of either mentoring them from India, or who are their managers sitting out of India, right? Because there is less physical interaction, and that gap kind of increases over a period of time, and that leads to a lot of revenue losses or revenue leakages, if I say so. Right, so that's something we're going to cover in this session today. First, trying to understand more about sales enablement and why do we need it, right? So the whole idea is to make sure that you're able to reduce the time between the customer discovers your product to that customer becoming a paying customer, right? And obviously, it's not a single man job to drive sales enablement. There are different functions which needs to get involved. And anyone wants to take a shot? Who ideally should be responsible for sales enablement? Or which team ownership should this be?
Product and marketing.
Product, okay, and marketing. All right. Anybody else? Any other team you think should be involved in this activity? Sales as well, right? Yeah, it's a function of 3 teams combined, which includes marketing, product, and sales. The product team is required because essentially they're the teams who are responsible for building the product, so they should be tightly coupled with anything and everything which the sales team is supposed to do. The marketing team gets the messaging right, that should reflect the core messaging of product, and the sales team has to make sure that all their conversations are talking about the same value. And that's the important point. If you look at the stages of sales enablement, right, these are the 3 stages which I would like to put forward. The first stage includes hiring or pre-onboarding. The second stage is onboarding. And the third stage is ongoing. Can anybody, any of us are doing anything on the hiring or pre-onboarding side? Or what does this even mean? Like, how can you enable somebody even before hiring? Has anybody done that in this? Please.
So we deliver online content to people who would be our prospect hires in inside sales, and we kind of try and find a fit. So there's a period which kind of comes before they join, maybe they are on notice period.
Yeah.
And we try and prepare them for the customer journey that they are going to encounter when they start becoming a part of our team.
Great example. Anybody else who's doing something similar? Where we are investing time even before somebody joins us. And there is obviously, it's a double-edged sword because it totally depends upon your joining date as well. You might end up wasting time on resources who may not even join you. But it is something which you have to do. Any other examples? Alright, so I'll give you something interesting there, right? So when it comes to hiring or pre-onboarding, we're not only talking about the people you have shortlisted, but we're also talking about the process of hiring in itself. When it comes to hiring salespeople, there are 2 kinds of people you will end up hiring, right? One is your direct sales force who are having individual targets, and then you're going to hire the managers, right? Who are going to have team targets. One thing which we are seeing as a problem in this stage, right? And that's more of an industry-wide problem, wherein many direct salespeople or individual contributors are getting promoted as sales leaders, right? They are very great in individual selling, but they've never managed teams. And that's something which most of you would face while you're building your own organization. You would end up promoting people who are great salespeople themselves, right? But the individual characteristic, which is how do you make sure that you're putting your team first and then making them sell effectively without going into too many micromanagement scenarios, is very important. And that's one of the key characteristics you need to look at while you're hiring your sales leaders, right? Have they done that in the past? What kind of teams they have managed? Have they managed global teams or not? So that is what I mean by focusing on the enablement side even before you are getting somebody onboarded. So that's the hiring part of it. Like, are you looking at some of the nuances which your product requires to sell in terms of technology understanding, in terms of geographical understanding, if they are focused on certain geography, in terms of cultural nuances, have they sold in that particular region in the past, and have they sold similar product in the past, what kind of network they are bringing in. So that's more on the hiring side, and the pre-onboarding piece is something which my friend mentioned, that once you have made the decision that this person is going to join you, how do you keep them engaged? How do you make sure that, and this also results into a good joining ratio as well, how do you make sure that they are going through your content? How do you make sure that, because during their transition period, they do have some time off, right? I mean, the workload is getting reduced day by day. So that means they can get onboarded even before they come to you on day 1. And that also helps you understand what is their interest level, right? So you are not waiting for somebody to join and you know they will not show up. So those scenarios are also avoided. So it's a very good strategy, if you can involve somebody senior in your organization who can run this for you, right? Wherein they can take a few sessions, like we have done that in the past, wherein we keep usually 2 to 3 sessions with some of their departmental heads, and they tell them, what's your role is going to look like. Right, what exactly you should be doing right now, what kind of articles you should be reading. If it's a product role or if it's a sales role, then what kind of sales cycle do we have? And it's not spending too much of time, but also making sure that you give them something to do in their own free time if they can, right? So that's what pre-onboarding means. Onboarding would essentially be how do you have a structured onboarding program. What we have typically seen is that if sales people are getting hired remotely, they typically struggle to get hold of understanding the content, if at all there is some content available. And the second thing is they don't know what should be the process of going through it, right? And that's a cardinal sin, right? Wherein you're building some content, or even if you don't have any content, your salespeople are jumping from one sales call to another, but they have not been trained enough, right? And they're sitting in front of the customer and they're getting objections and they don't know how to answer, how to respond. And you as organization leaders, or you having different sales leaders within the organization, they cannot be present on every call. So is there a mechanism you're putting into place to onboard them correctly? And that sales onboarding should be different than any other role onboarding in itself, right? So what's your onboarding plan looking like is something you need to take care of. And the third thing, which is ongoing. Now, people usually focus on onboarding because they know that somebody needs to be onboarded. The pre-onboarding and the ongoing part usually gets again ignored. What ongoing means is, while your organization is scaling, right, you would have people who have spent 3 years with you, 4 years with you, right? And there are still certain areas within their own skill set which are still not addressed. They might have joined you from some other organization, right? And they are good salespeople, they do close deals, but maybe they are not so good in negotiations, right? Maybe they're not so good in technical. Maybe they are not so good in managing the team. So do you know those areas? Are you working on those areas? So ongoing is the stage wherein when you have already made documented inputs regarding individual people who are part of your sales organization, and then what are we doing to make sure that those areas are also checked? How do you make them rockstar, right? So are you having any definite programs around making your sales organization rockstars on where they're supposed to be? So that's another area wherein specific focus should be given, apart from just focusing on onboarding the salespeople. Any interesting examples, people who are present here, where you have seen good ongoing enablement practices? When I say ongoing, it's not a yearly exercise, it has to be very regular. When I say regular, it has to be something as specific as quarterly, right? Wherein you are probably taking assessments, wherein you're probably letting them demonstrate about the product, right? For example, when Venkit was talking about their product, right? Their product would have evolved in the past 4 to 6 years, or maybe in past 1 year itself. Sometimes what we see is salespeople are still selling what they knew 1 year back, while the product has evolved into something totally different. Because they know something, they keep on talking about that a lot. When the market needs would have changed completely, right? A lot of playbooks changed post-COVID because the messaging changed post-COVID, right? So are your salespeople talking about the relevant subjects or not? How do you know that? How do you capture that? Do you have to go to every sales call to understand what they're talking about, or do you have tools to record and then assess? So that's what ongoing typically means, and just wanted to know if you have set up some mechanisms to probably measure the efficacy of salespeople who are a little older into the organization, not relatively new. Any examples?
So HubSpot has an automatic transcription service on all outgoing calls. It doesn't work perfectly on the Indian English accent.
Yeah.
It does a decent job. Like we launched generative AI within our product. So we want that within 30 days, almost everybody doing sales calls should be using generative AI within the pitch.
Okay.
You can make markers in HubSpot and it highlights that this person used it 50% lesser than X guy who's doing it well.
Yeah.
And then on a monthly, we have OKR review call, which is like a 15-minute that the HR does. And there's a certain pattern to it, and we look at this as a very important marker.
Yeah.
And then the content creation around whatever product features you're releasing has to be really good. Everything should be released in a video. Make sure that it's consumed by people. So we do all of that as well. That we can't launch a product. There shouldn't be a delay of even a few hours between the launch and the video.
Yeah.
So people are ready to kind of imbibe that.
Great example. So I think what he was referring to was a transcripting tool which can help you understand how things are being communicated. Another tool could be MindTickle, right? MindTickle has capabilities wherein you can record the sessions. MindTickle has an AI module which tells you, what kind of fillers are being used, how many times they're talking about competition. Whatever you structure during the whole setup of MindTickle, you can get to know, is your team talking about the right stuff or not? And there are several other tools, right, which does the similar stuff. So it's very important to understand, where each and every one member of your sales organization stand and what additional inputs or programs they would need to even do better. And while you're spending or investing that time in them, they also feel appreciated, and they also tend to stick around longer. If they came with certain skill sets and they stayed that way, it might become a debt for you. And that debt, sometimes which I call a bad hiring debt as well, is something which is immense, right? Especially in the enterprise SaaS space, if you hire somebody, you spend 3 months to hire them, right? And if they stick around for another 6 months without doing anything meaningful, that becomes another 1 year cycle, end to end, wherein you would have to hire out somebody else in another 3 months. So 3 months in hiring, 6 months of blank space, and then another 3 months of hiring somebody else. So 1 year of projected revenue, which you forecasted internally to your board or to your leadership, just tries it, right? And imagine you doing that hiring across globe, and you might end up hiring 20% wrong people. That's a 20% of incorrect forecast because of that bad hiring. So how do you take that into control? Make sure that you're always interviewing your best performers. Like, what is it which is working for them? right? And also interview your not so good performers, right? Do a very neutral assessment and try and understand. And it doesn't have to be going into very micro calendar things where you're trying to understand where they're spending time or so. But you need to know at a broader level what exactly is this person is doing right versus what is it you don't have to do because that's not working. Right? It may not be a person problem, it could be a market problem which needs to be addressed with the relevant content. It could be a positioning problem which needs to be addressed with proper marketing, right, or proper channel. And that is the point where you need to be if you're talking about the ongoing enablement piece, right? And it requires a whole structure of enablement team which can drive that along with the tools. All right. When Venkat was talking about the ICP and the buying process and the buyer profile, on the enablement side, right, even before you set up your enablement practice, you need to understand whether this enablement practice is making sense for you or not. How would you know that? For that, you need to understand where you stand today, right? For any SaaS company, some of these metrics which are defined here, I have not put numbers here because they may vary from company to company, but some of these metrics which you should be tracking ideally, it includes your win to lose rate, right? Pre-enablement time, and then obviously after you put in efforts, how is it increasing at an individual level or at an org level? Your ramp time. Now ramp time is the time which is defined with respect to how much time your sales team would effectively take from their joining date till the time you start delivering something, right? So is it reducing with the help of sales enablement practice?
So
sales cycle.
Sorry, I'm cutting you between. So win-loss ratio is again in an enterprise SaaS segment, which is where you have good competition, is always some debate in the market.
Yeah.
What as per you is the ideal win-loss percentage should be in a SaaS enterprise SaaS environment with the competition you have?
Yeah, I would reserve my comments in terms of what's the ideal ratio here. What I'm referring to here is wherever you are right now. Let's take an example, right? Maybe out of 10 deals you're working on, you're able to close 35%, or let's say 3.5 deals you're closing, right? So at this stage you're at a 35% ratio. So 3 you're winning, let's say 10 you're losing. Okay, that's how you're coming at 35%. So if you're currently standing at 35% out of those 13 deals, then after setting up an enablement practice, the expectation is this ratio should improve. You should lose less deals.
Understood. But I'm just still trying to understand. I'm thinking what is what is considered to be any benchmark?
No, I would not be able to give you the specific because it will be very broad. Like if I have to give you a broad number, then it will be anywhere between 20% to 35%.
Okay.
That's where organizations try to see, and this happens to reduce if you are focusing on a very narrow pipeline, which means you're not investing time everywhere. You're not trying to increase your horizon, right? Because if you increase your horizon, you will start considering opportunities. And sometimes what happens is that, and that's going to be in the subsequent slide, wherein what do you call an opportunity, right? So when I say lose rate, am I calculating on the qualified opportunities or am I calculating it on the pipeline, right? And usually that's a mistake which usually salespeople make is calling any opportunity a qualified opportunity, right? So usually if you look at if you ask any company and I'll look at their CRM, that's the first thing which any CRO would want to clean, which is what is my actual funnel? Like every week if you're doing a sales review, this is one question which will be very pertinent in every discussion. What is my actual funnel? What actual funnel means is these are qualified opportunities where somebody has a budget, somebody has a need, and somebody has commit to invest into this space, right? And the reason why we don't get those actual numbers is because of the inefficacies in forecasting or inefficacies in the actual pipeline in a CRM, right? So that's how it is structured. Similarly, if your sales cycle is currently standing at 4 months, can it reduce further? If your sales cycle is 9 months, can it reduce further? Or will it reduce with the help of enablement? Independent sales stage length. What that means is, let's say if you're in a discovery stage, or in a requirement gathering stage, or let's say you are in a product demonstration stage, or in a proposal stage, or the negotiation stage. How much time are you taking at each stage? And is it improving with respect to enablement? Average deal size that is supposed to improve. What is your closed loss reason? That's an important area. Like if you're losing your accounts, right, and if you're not tracking why you're losing them, and that input is not coming back to as an enablement, then that doesn't make any sense for you to grow. Number of reps achieving your quota. And if you have only one person out of 10 people achieving quota, then there is something wrong in how you're set up the practice, right? And that needs to improve. And the content usage. You can build all the content in the world, but if your team is not trained enough to use what content where, then that content would not make any sense. Are you tracking that information? Like, your marketing team is building great content, right? There are great aesthetics around it, and you are almost investing a lot in that. But are you monitoring what is the usage of that content? How many people even know that such content exists? Usually what I see is salespeople calling other salespeople to have something like this, without even knowing that there is a central repository which is kind of holding all that stuff. And they sometimes don't even know what content to use there. So how does that happen? That happens only with the help of the enablement practice you said, right? What's the purpose of demand base? What's the purpose of Lucia? What's the purpose of Zoom Info, Outreach, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, right? These are the common tools. You can start by picking one or two and then see how they're working for you. On the sales and pre-sales side, you have tools like Avenue, which are acting as a content repository. For example, for filling an RFP or an RFI, you can also do that in a freemium version on Google Docs, right? To make sure that every type of question gets addressed and stored there, so that your sales team is not creating content every time they are facing any issues. Your sales CRM, which could be HubSpot or a Zoho or a Salesforce. Mindtickle again, right? Great tool in terms of making sure that you are not only creating a premium customer experience, but also you are enabling your team with respect to how they are improving on monthly basis, right? In terms of content, in terms of words, in terms of their talk to listen ratio. Very important for a salesperson, right? How much time they're listening, how much time you're asking questions, how much time they're getting questions asked, and so on. Enablement functions, right? Wherein you had marketing team, sales team, and product team. Things which marketing team should take care of, that includes targeted and consistent messaging. It should not happen that at times you are promoting something else and then you completely deviate from your standard messaging. Compelling case studies, very important. It should not be created purely from the marketing sense, but also good input should be taken from the customer success managers or account managers and the customer directly, to make sure that those case studies are not only understood by the customer but also by their own team members, right? Battle cards, very important. I've seen sales people struggling with if somebody throws the name of a competition which they know is bigger, right? But we all have certain things which we are good at. So how to create those battle cards and make sure marketing can help you in that. Sales tech, short videos, white papers, podcast webinars. All these things are part of the knowledge repository which marketing team typically builds. For salespeople, very important to focus on the PQs. Now, PQs means pre-qualified opportunities, which are either being qualified coming in from a channel, could be from some of the channels which Venkat highlighted, or it could be from the exact sales team, it could be from an event, it could be somebody just coming on your website, right? How do you qualify them as an SQ is very important, right? There could be tons of deals which are coming your way, but they could not qualify your framework. You could be following any framework, could be band, could be Medpic, whatever framework you're following, just make sure that that qualification happens in the most immaculate way. You're putting those variables and then only qualify. There is no push, and that would be my suggestion to any leader over here. You should not push your teams to qualify those deals as soon as they get it or as soon as they get onto a discovery call. Make sure that you have all the inputs before you qualify them. The reason I'm stressing on this fact is because it ties away with the point with Jayant was highlighting, right? How do you know what is your win-loss ratio? So your win-loss ratio depends upon how much time you invest on focusing on quality opportunities, and how do you make sure that your sales force, which is your Bible, or your CRM, which is your Bible, reflects the truth, right? So any other opportunity wherein the team is working upon, that should not be marked as a qualified opportunity until they are very confident on that, and that should stay that way, because then everybody trusts what is coming out of the system. Use case driven demos. I think again one common mistake people do, especially in B2B SaaS, is that sometimes we're industry agnostic, right? We're selling to financial companies, we're selling to let's say e-commerce, we're selling to retail, we're selling to probably Horeca, because the product is industry agnostic. And if any of you are selling an industry agnostic product, being industry agnostic doesn't mean that the demo has to be standard. It has to be custom tailored. It has to be designed and spoken in a way which your customer understands. And if you're saying different terms which comes from an FMCG industry background, but you are selling it to an e-commerce person, they would believe that your product is not tailor made for them, right? And SaaS is still evolving. I know it's been a decade since the evolution of SaaS companies, but still many customers like to hear terms which which they use on a day-to-day basis. So if you have salespeople, you cannot create industry-level salespeople. The sales team has to be industry agnostic. They can be more regional focused, but they should know the industry-level terms, and that's what the use case-driven demo means. Adopting and following the sales playbook. So one thing which is there is that you have a sales playbook in place. The other thing is it being followed or not, right? So that's something which needs to be there. Demo scripts, very relevant. How do you make sure that based on the use case you have created, you've created very perfectly driven, articulated demo scripts, which they can refer to and they can prepare for demonstrations before even joining that conversation. Objection handling scripts. Again, another area which we don't spend too much time on, but how do you handle use cases related to data security? How do you handle use cases related to hosting? If you are going to sell in Europe, then obviously the first question is going to be where are you hosted, right? And if you are trying to sell a solution, there will be questions around where do you store your data, right? So just one of example, but objection handling could also be related to how are you better than this competition, or how are you better than my incumbent solution which I'm using, right? So there has to be a proper data which can help people on their own understand, and there has to be continuous walkthroughs around it. Persona and ICP understanding. There are times when people are too much involved into an opportunity, and that even doesn't qualify as an ICP. And you have to tell them that you should drop this particular opportunity. The sales person would feel that, hey, I have invested too much of time, and I know they would sign up. But still, the fact remains they're not part of your ICP, right? So how do you make sure that the team understands that ICP very well, and then obviously creating email templates and sequencing. On the product team side, sharing collaterals around product keys. This is something which makes sure that the teams which are present in distant locations, they are also aware about how the product is evolving. Listening to customer sales team feedback, very important for the product team, because sales team and customer management team are directly interacting with the market, right? And they are coming up with better suggestions. So how are you capturing that feedback is very important. And then doing competitive benchmarking. Please do not expect your marketing team to do that for you alone. There has to be some feedback which needs to come in from the product team, because they understand the solution space better. So it has to be a collaborative approach. And then doing the product training, right? When the product team is designing product, they're designing a user journey. So they are the best people, how they envisage a particular user flow to be executed by anybody who's using the product. So if that is not being explained well to the actual selling team, which could be the team of solution consultants or pre-sales or sales, then they might end up explaining it in a different way. So how do you make sure that any new release is getting tied, or are there any video tutorials which somebody can look at on how this product ideally should be marketed, is something which is very important. Okay, now this is something which ties to the ongoing piece, wherein when we look at our CRM, right, there is a concept of aging, right, on what deal is in what state and how much it has aged in that particular stage. So if you look at discovery call, requirement gathering, or an RFI, could be an RFP or a proposal stage, could be a negotiation or a closed one. It's very important to understand where are you losing on your funnel, or where are your sales team members struggling in terms of pushing any opportunity forward. If you're not looking at this data, that means it will remain in that shape for quite a longer duration, which essentially means that you're not using the outcome from your sales CRM, which you're supposed to better your productivity or improve your forecasting, right? So if let's say you see many opportunities in the requirement stage for more than 60 days, it's a red flag, right? It should not take that much of time if you're talking about 4 months of sales cycle. If you're seeing something in a proposal stage for more than 90 days, right? That's something which is very common, by the way, where sales people submit a proposal and then they don't hear back. Then what was the need to submit when there was no budget or timeline or need, right? So, so you have to understand whether it is an org level problem or an individual level problem, and then tie it back as an input to the sales enablement. That this is one area for this individual, or this is one area at an org level, which we need to work upon. Sales story. This is something which is very interesting, very close to my heart as well. I think to make sure that we invest, and this is in my previous role at Next, we invest a lot of time in terms of cultivating the feeling of togetherness and learning. What we did was we curated a weekly 1-hour block, and we did that for last 4 years while I was there, right? we created a 1 hour block weekly wherein we used to invite everybody in the sales team from US, from Europe, from Southeast Asia, from Middle East into one common call. Obviously, it's a difficult battle to get a time slot, so we usually do it at 6 p.m., which is comfortable with US folks as well as folks who are sitting in Singapore. And the agenda was very simple. We will talk about, every week we used to take a topic or a subject. We used to talk about a closed call. It could be driven by Singapore team, could be driven by Dubai team, could be driven by EU team, or could be driven by US team. We'll talk about what was the problem statement, how did we pitch, how did we address that problem, how much time we took, who did we map, and what was the why side. Right? So that would be that we would pick every week after week, we'll pick something which was one, and we used to educate everybody else. That way, even if I'm selling in Dubai, I understand what's working in Singapore. I understand what's working in US. And I can use those examples, right? Some of these companies are pretty global in nature, and they like to talk to people who know about their product. They like to listen to more stories about how other customers are successful. So if I've cracked the case of Unilever and P&G in Indonesia, and I'm now talking to Nestle, more or less the broader problems will remain the same. Obviously, there will be some regional problems. So I can use those narratives in my stories. And the reason we have to do it repetitively is because of one common fact, that whatever we discuss in these sessions, 80% will be eroded the next day. People will forget. And that's one of the reasons we have to do it weekly. So that the retention keeps on compounding. Right? So if I tell something today, if 80% is getting eroded, they still hold to that 20%. The next week I do it again. If I leave it there, then nothing is there. They're blank. Right? So then we talk about closed lost. More learnings coming from those opportunities which were lost. That's something which nobody likes to talk about. Why did we lose this opportunity? The salesperson tries to avoid that topic, nobody wants to talk about it, but that's where the entire learning lies. Right? So how do you understand what went wrong? Did we not map the stakeholders correctly? Were we not aware of the competition? Should we have not chased this opportunity at all? Are we learning from this or not? So that's when you get candid. We talk about all the stuff which is a possibility, and we close that hour in a very candid way. New industry vertical, right? Sometimes you are not even aware that your product is useful for this industry vertical, and you happen to stumble upon it, and then you nailed 100% product fitment for that industry. And now you're thinking, should I go ahead? Should I launch this as a vertical or not? Right? That's a challenge everybody faces, right? Should I just keep on narrowing down on what I'm focusing, or should I expand? And if you have to do that, that can only happen if you're collaborating and brainstorming together. A new territory, like with something Venkat touched upon very, very nicely. Events and conferences. If we are attending an event or a trade show in US, and we had a good footfall, how did we do that? Can we replicate similar success in Dubai? What exactly are we doing? Are we giving champagnes, or are we throwing darts, or are we giving lucky draws? What else worked there? How are we passing on that information to others? So that information dissemination is the most important subject if you're talking about enablement, right? And those sessions used to help. Customer adoption. We used to take successful customers. See, trust me, no matter how many case studies you create, people are going to read it, still not able to understand what worked, because those case studies are written in 1-pagers usually. Even if there are 4-pagers, people still don't understand what the actual problem is. But if somebody comes onto that call, spends 15 minutes and explain it beautifully that this is exactly how it happened, and then you make it interactive wherein people can ask questions, that actually means that story will stick. And we all understand, right? Stories stick around. For whatever reason, what I'm telling you today, this sales story thing will stick around for longer duration versus the previous slides, because stories have an impact, right? So that's one of the reasons why we're in customer adoption, and why is customer using you? I mean, you would have people working with you for the last 2 years, they are looking at the sales cycle, they're pitching something, they still don't understand how customer use it. They sell 100 things, customer use only 2 things. They don't know that. They are living in their own world wherein, oh, this is what my product does. But they don't know what customer actually uses. It's good to know that, because then they can focus on those areas more and even improve their win ratio, rather than talking about 10 different things which customers might or might not even use. So customer adoption stories should be spoken about on-site visits. Like if you are making on-site visits, which did not happen for last couple of years for most of us, but if you are doing them, they become special. Right? We create videos from our own on-site visits. We try to capture everything on how the processes are happening, how the product is coming in, and then use those videos in our internal conversations, right? Which makes people understand the real world. If you hire somebody now which has not visited the market, how do you train them? You should have some content, right? So that's how the on-site visits videos used to help. And then obviously the product training piece of it. Alright, last slide would be something which again, some of the mistakes we should be avoiding. one thing is when should I start my sales enablement journey? Some of you would think, hey, let me have a 10-member team or maybe 20-member team. That's the right stage for me to start sales enablement. The answer is no. You should start from sales enablement since the day you start selling. Because once you start selling, you will keep on building collaterals, right? And those collaterals may be lying in individual repository, and that person may move out. That's the harsh reality, right? And that person takes away all that knowledge. So enabling not only means supporting the new members, but also means what are you documenting and how are you documenting it, and how that can be used in future. Not making the sales enablement plan measurable, right? What that means is you have created a plan, but you did not focus on the metrics we spoke about in one of the slides, right? Which is what is your current sales cycle, what is your current ramp-up time, what is your current ARR, right? Or your average deal size. How much time do you take to enter a market, right? And how much time do you take to create a success? I'll give you examples from my own experience, right? My biggest deal closure happened to be in one of the remotest countries, which is Chile, and that was in few $1 million of ARR, right? And I could never imagine that we can even sell in Chile. But thanks to COVID, those things were happening wherein you can sell remotely, right? And most of the companies went global all in those times wherein physical meetings were not even requested for, right? Otherwise, we used to just travel a lot and do few meetings. Now we are doing multiple meetings in a day, and customers are also kind of accepting those things, right? So making a sales enablement plan measurable is very important. Consistent efforts around sales enablement. Another cardinal sin is that you set up a process, and the reason I'm highlighting this point is that when I say that we have set up that 1 hour call weekly, we did it religiously for 52 weeks, we did it for 4 years, and we're still doing it while I'm not even there, right? Which essentially means that irrespective of whatever your other priorities are, right? And there will be many more priorities than focusing on sales enablement. Like you may get a customer call at that time, which you have to attend. The sales enablement will always take a backseat in those scenarios. That should not happen. And that's what I mean by staying consistent with that. You decide in advance, you structure a session, don't make it boring. People don't like one-way content being delivered, just like this one. So, but make sure that you're staying focused on the content side. And the other thing is you don't have a dedicated person doing this. You might want to give it to somebody who is doing it part-time. You might want to give it to somebody who's not meeting their targets. That should not happen. Think of it as an investment you're making in people. You do multiple kinds of investment in your people. You take them out, you give them a good time out in a bar or something, right? You invest a lot in your people, but what sometimes you miss out on investing on something which they actually need is a good enablement solution or a good enablement program, right? So make sure that even if you're remotely thinking about doing it from tomorrow, do it from tomorrow. Don't wait longer to initiate this, right? And get a structured process. Keep on doing iterations, keep on improvising on it, and you will land into a place where anybody who joins you appreciates this program, this structured way of learning things, and they will find the experience of working with you a lot more different than their previous tools. Because not many of these SaaS organizations are focusing on it, right? And that's the reason why their older reps in the system probably are able to do a lot better than newer reps, because newer reps take time to ramp up, right? And that time could be anywhere between 6 to 9 months to even 12 months. Like in 12 months, they don't make any sale or any reasonable, noticeable sale because nobody focused on the ramp up. We kept on looping them into different calls. They kept on listening into different stuff. There was no pre-context. There was no post-context. They move on into another call and then they're just trying to assimilate those things together. That could be avoided with just a 2-member team or a 1-member team to start with, who is just focusing on enablement, and then you will see this team growing into multiple dimensions in case you ended up expanding globally, right? And in case you are planning to sell globally, then it's a must-have good to have.
Sales process, a lot of things are manually fed into the CRM.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of humans doing it,
Yeah.
unlike the marketing function where you can automate this measurements.
Yes.
So a lot of time they don't do it consistently, and sometimes they don't do it right. They won't feed the right information, and then it gives you a certain sort of not aligned, the right picture. So what measures one can take to have a better picture and better measurement here?
I think that's one of the areas in a very practical scenario wherein most of the sales leaders struggle with is, can I trust this data or not? In ideal world, there should not be any manual intervention. But we don't live in an ideal world, right? People will still end up qualifying opportunities and then coming back and saying, can we not qualify this? And we just from the back end change it, right? Or people will end up committing something as a this year or this quarter deal, and then we get a shock that the budget is on hold, or probably they kind of went ahead with somebody else, right? And you were very sure that this is our deal, right? So there will be some manual intervention always there. The focus is that how can we make sure that we train our people better to enter the right data in the first place. For example, while you are creating an opportunity in your CRM, right, you might be asking some things like, who's the competition if you are looking, what's their exact pain point, right? What is the solution they are using, right? Make those fields mandatory, right? Or make sure that at certain stage they have to be mandatory. Like after discovery call, they have to be mandatory. You cannot change the stage, right? And then you monitor your sales performance after the discovery call, which is after a certain opportunity reaches a particular stage in the CRM, right? That way you will still know that okay, this data is 80% accurate, right? And then obviously there will be some inaccuracies coming in. The other part is the training part. Are we talking about this enough? People don't even know that CRM is being looked upon every fortnight or every quarter, and they need to make sure that it is reflecting the truth. Like they're not sure how, because every organization has a different way to run their CRM. Some people coming from a background where any junk can be in CRM, but some organizations treat their CRM as the single source of truth. So we don't know, what background they come from. So they need to be trained on that fact that this is how we govern our CRM. This is the expectation from every team member on how they should be entering the data, how confident they should be while entering any particular input, and that's how you make sure that your accuracy keeps on improving. But again, it ties back to the point that what is your accuracy right now versus where you want to be, and then take those proactive measures.
You don't know what is your accuracy. That's irrelevant.
You would know it because that ties back to the point, what is your projected forecast for this quarter versus your achieved forecast, right? And then you know how off you are, and that keeps on improving, and that improves at an individual level first and then at an org level. Yes, sir.
This is an amazing session. So we also try setting up the sales enablement as a function here, but we didn't dedicate anyone to drive this program in general, right? So we had one person from product, one from marketing, and one from sales, setting it up as a collaborative process.
Correct.
That didn't work because everyone has their own KRA. So this thing actually got into the backseat. So how do you find this key guy, full-time sales enablement person? What is the right kind of KRA or the skill set that you would be looking for?
I think at this stage we have many leaders who are turning into sales enablement. People have sold heavily in the past, right? So sales enablement as a team is as a function or as a role has grown or evolved, especially in SaaS. Right? Usually sales enablement was heavily done in manufacturing or FMCG companies, right? Where you have thousands of people who you need to train on how is my product different. Like if I'm a Unilever sales enablement leader, I need to know how I'm different from a P&G or a different product, right? Now with respect to the IT structure growing, right, and from services to SaaS now, enablement as a function has grown a lot. And SaaS in itself requires a lot of enablement because it's very product and industry specific. While you're selling services, right, you can build something out of scratch, but in products it has to be very focused. And that's where in the last 10 years we have seen that enablement as a role has grown. Many leaders are changing, including CROs and sales leaders from different organizations. They are investing their later part of their career into enablement as a function. And from their experience, they can come in, they can set up something, right? But my personal mantra is, you should devote somebody from the founding team to this, and that should be their care. It should not be just an optional role. It has to be tied back to them. It has to be monetized in certain. It has to be incentivized in certain. Because if it is not, then there's going to be a bug which is there, which will take a priority. There's going to be a customer which requires immediate attention, which will take priority. And if that happens, you will again be off track. And if you go off track, people stop respecting your process. And when people stop respecting your process, then the results are something which most of us see, right? Wherein it doesn't work.
So someone junior would not work, right?
It will
like
because see, enablement would also mean a lot of mentoring and coaching and stuff, right? So it cannot be somebody who is into first 5 years of their career. I think somebody who is 10 years plus in experience, that's what we have seen working well for other companies also. Like, and I've spoken to majority of SaaS companies in India and outside India on sales enablement as a concept, right? And they keep on focusing on measuring individual performance, and that happens at a quarterly level, at an org level, right? And then they tie it back to the enablement function, and there is a dedicated team which does that. And it is applicable to growing companies as well, right? Because if you're thinking long term, then invest right now. If you're thinking short term, then give it to a part-timer. But part-timer will only let you be somewhere, right? So put it somewhere in your budgeting, somewhere in your hiring plan that, oh, I need this person who's purely going to focus. And again, I will not advise it to somebody who is very young in their growth journey, right? Because then the CEO can take their ownership, founder can take their ownership. But once you're at a $1 million ARR, that's when you're going from 1 million to let's say $10 million, or let's say from 10 million to $50 million. That cannot happen if you're not building repeatability. And repeatability only comes if you have something in place which can lead to that scale. Right? 0 to 1 million, even 1 to 5 million can happen without a sales enablement function. But if you're growing your sales team, please make sure that you are having the enablement first, then grow your team, not the other way around. Because even if you hire a person, that will be hiring them. You hire somebody, they're not getting enabled, you will hire somebody in US, let's say. You hire a 5-member team, they will come to office at 8, they will move back by 2 or 3 p.m. just making few calls and then not learning anything about the product. They're already culturally disconnected, right? They're not in the physical space. You will meet them once a year, twice a year when they come, you call them to your office, right? But if you're not enabling them with content, with the same knowledge, which the people in your India office have because they meet often or they interact often, then you cannot expect the same results. And they are not at fault. We are at fault if you're not doing that.
And what has worked better, a salesperson being an enablement role, or a product person being an enablement role?
Great question. I will answer this differently. It has to be a salesperson for sure, but somebody who is technically aligned, not just a seller. It means that they should understand product as a whole. They should have a technical mindset. They should have sold technical products in the past. They can drive the product team to get the desired objectives because product team has their own roles, right, regarding training and stuff. So it has to be a seller because they understand the sales mindset. So and that's what is happening in the space also. People who are purely turning into sales enablement leaders, they have sold aggressively in the past. They have an ability to coach. That mindset has to be there. They should not again be individual contributors. They should have led teams in the past, and they become a good sales enablement leaders because they have a functional knowledge, they have tools knowledge, they have people understanding, and they have done this at a global scale.
So should these guys be running the quotas also at the same time? Because they should be pure leaders.
If you want to start somewhere, then I think there's something which works at certain organizations wherein you give a 50% target, right? And the 50% target comes in from sales enablement, right? In terms of those metrics, are they improving or not? And you tie their incentive around those incentives, around those metrics. If those are improving, then they will spend that 50% time on actually running sales enablement. But it's like a workaround, it's like a jugaad which people do. I would still not recommend it, but if there is no other way, then you can follow that. And that's why I was not advocating it in the first place, wherein you have 50% revenue driven targets and 50% KPI driven targets, because it will require 100% investment in time, because you're running the entire team.
But doesn't it create confusion at certain point of time, because sales people are anyway, they're fighting with marketing guys, and then you have an enablement guy who is trying to, and then you have sales operations also as a third layer. So too many people drive the sales team, and then they're not responsible for the quota person.
Correct.
Right.
Sales enablement will never talk about with team members individually in terms of what's your pipeline looking like, or what's your forecast looking like, or have you entered the correct details in CRM. That's the job of sales operations, right? Which again comes at a very later stage usually in any organization, right? So sales operations as a function is completely different. Sales enablement will purely focusing on how do you make sure that your team has everything. And usually, if you're not mixing these two things together, wherein you have same person doing operations and enablement, then there is no confusion. Like, and there is one line of command which is running enablement, and people teach enablement as a support function. Where this team exists, which will guide me where is certain content. So I need to get trained on. I am maybe personally lagging in this aspect about product, industry, customer, or competition. Can you help me with that? Can you arrange specific training which may happen in this week or so, and others can participate. So then there is no confusion. But if you have a common team which is driving operations, which is revenue operations or sales operations, which fundamentally is structured around your sales forecasting, your pipeline management, your accuracy in the CRM, and then obviously clearing it for internal purpose, then there can be confusion that why are two different chain of commands coming in. So ideally that should not be a mix, but again at a growing stage those two guards do more.
And what is the growth for this enablement person?
Usually these people are driven by the fact how those metrics are going, right? So you have typically your director of sales in any organization if you're structuring it up. They report either to the CEO or to the CRO. That's the structure. They don't have a path to become a CRO because they're actually purely different training and enablement function, right? Beneath that, you can have a senior manager for enablement, and then you have a manager for enablement, and that is usually suggested for teams which are 1,000 plus, and you have a sales team of 100 people plus. Right? For a smaller team, it should ideally be, when I say smaller, less than 200, 300 people team, it should ideally be a one-man show, right? Which is driving this on. Once you reach a stage of 600 plus, maybe you have 2 people show, and then 1,000 plus people.
But I think most of us sitting here are startups. We struggle to get a salesperson in place also. So sales enablement will become big ask.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you may have 2-3 member sales team. Now, you said that you should think of enablement first and then sales team later, which is right. But in this scenario, how do we how should we plan the mix? Because you want to spend money in getting a sales guy first, and rather than in an enablement guy. How do you? Because it cannot, at this stage, you may not want to have a dedicated enablement guy because he is enabling only one guy.
It all depends upon the stage, as you rightly said, right? So if you are having, I'm giving you mixes of team, right? When we started our enablement, we did not start it from day one, right? We started at a stage when we had global people getting in.
Okay.
Right? We had somebody sitting in Dubai, one person sitting in Dubai, 2 people sitting in Kuala Lumpur, 1 person sitting in US, right? And then multiple people sitting in India. And that time our revenue split was largely centered around Asia Pacific, less in the US side. And we were thinking to grow on those territories. And those territories are now giving good revenue to us. Right? That was the time when we thought that, this cannot work this way wherein somebody is spending half of it. We had a dedicated sales enablement person driving this for us. So that's how any startup would do, right? Wherein you start from a mix. Right? You see where you reach the stage wherein now it's getting unmanageable for somebody doing part-time on this activity, and you're going all in terms of growth. Like you have, let's say, raised a Series B, and that's the sweet spot, right? Series B companies usually end up hiring a sales enablement as a function. Seed round entities, they are focusing on enablement, but not a full-time person is there. So enablement has to be there in the DNA, right? When you're collating content, right? Content is structured, your drive is very much articulated well, and there's somebody, usually the founder, or the founding team members. And that's what I suggested to Sanjay also, that usually founders or founding team members are the right person instead of hiring somebody from outside. And once you reach a stage, which could be Series A or Series B plus, and you raise, let's say, 10 million, 20 million, $30 million, then you can obviously think about hiring.
So initial period, can this role be kind of tagged along with the marketing team, or do you think marketing may not do justice to this?
Marketing can do this because if you look at the roles and responsibilities also, many things are coming in from marketing. Right? And it has to be somebody with experience. That's the only catch here. Somebody who's fresh, somebody who's into 4 years or 5 years of experience, they will not be able to understand and explain how do I change the ramp set, because these are their targets to reduce the ramp up time. They have to think it through. What is the problem in my current ramp up time? Where are they struggling? They have to talk to people and understand that stuff. And that's why you need somebody experienced who can drive this way. But until we have that somebody, usually what you've seen is that younger people in startups are also as good as an experienced person in the company. So you have to find that sweet spot and see if this person is young, but he has an understanding, or he or she has an understanding about how my industry works. And that thing can be very individualistic. What I'm telling you is more like a structured way of doing this, but that doesn't apply to everybody. Right? And you have to take those notional calls, but the only recommendation is that somebody has to be, in your eyes, experienced, not in terms of years, but in terms of understanding the domain and what will work. Right? And usually people who are old timers in any organization, anybody who comes in new respects them because they're old timers, right? And they have a huge amount of knowledge and they are carrying that burden on their shoulders from some time. So even if you are a 3-year-old entity and you have somebody who's with you from day one, I'm calling that an experienced person for at least this activity.
Okay.
Okay. Any more questions? All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you.